Welcome back. A new series on SABC2 chronicles the untold story of the Khoekhoe herders, one of South Africa's First Nations, as it explores the legacy of the forgotten people. For so many years, they were believed to be extinct, wiped out by disease, a myth perpetuated by the colonial powers and the Apartheid regime. According to its creators, this landmark series uses a modern interpretation of historical records by historians, rock art and excavations from archaeologists to reveal a new narrative. To tell us more, we're joined via Zoom by one of its presenters, Rehane Abrahams, and writer and director Johann Abrahams, who's also a direct descendant. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. Now, Rehane, first of all, how much has been written about this nation and why, so little has been told about their story?
Of course, colonial erasure, apartheid erasure, has effectively, committed a genocide of the Khoekhoe and San people. And their stories have been erased, obviously, to take over land, because the colonial narrative is that land was uninhabited, that this was virgin land, and that enables colonial powers to take over land and wipe out the first people that were there that have claims to the land, not just physical claims to the land, but also spiritual claims to the land. So with that narrative, things, of course, were wiped out. And as part of the colonial project, languages were erased. People were punished for speaking their languages. Cultural traces were erased. Cultural practices were erased. And even in contemporary times, the way Western thought works is that it ignores indigenous practices, indigenous technologies, and indigenous histories with its narrative of colonial dominance.
And I understand that you spent some time with the Khoekhoes. Just talk to us about that and the experience.
I spent some time with the Khoekhoes and also with the Khoekhoe. It was interesting how much of the Overberg was populated by Khoekhoe. And it was also interesting in the contemporary research with DNA samples that the majority of colored people living in the Overberg have Khoekhoe DNA, that they are direct descendants, that they are Khoekhoe. I also spent some time with the Khoekhoe Nation, and the Khoekhoe Nation was a constituted Khoi nation that happened post-colonialism. They were a collection of people that wanted to be free and left the castle in like the first great trek that this country has experienced, with thousands of cattle and all different kinds of people who basically wanted to be free from colonial powers and started their own nation. They were persecuted, hunted down, and chased across the country, ending up on the Sotho border. But they're still existent, and I was walking through the Khoekhoe story with High Commissioner Aaron Messelaar. For me, the most moving thing that I experienced was a water ritual with the women in Campbell, where the women enacted a ritual of a woman's coming of age, and the ritual with a water serpent and speaking to the water. For me, connecting with this indigenous wisdom and this indigenous feminine power in connection to the land was remarkable. It was a truly life-changing experience.
No doubt this nation forms a very, very important part of our history. Why do you think they are the so-called forgotten nation? And do you think their rights in the South African context are being respected?
No, I don't. Of course, colored people used to be called Hottentots. So that was, I think, during British rule. Even then, with the derogatory term Hottentot, there was a direct link to ancestry and to land. But with the erasure of that history for colored people, people have basically been severed from their connection to the land. And as we all know, our connection to land is not just material. It's not just property. It's a sacred connection. It's a spiritual connection. So, of course, contemporary capitalism for this government and previous governments kind of block people's connection to land, and also, as in the case with the Nama, the land that people live on and have occupied for tens of thousands of years, is mineral rich, and that doesn't serve contemporary capitalist interests, of course. So people are given property in legislation where they are allowed to live on the surface of the land, but they have no ownership of the minerals and the mineral rights. So to contest that is a kind of groundbreaking thing. It's a very challenging thing. So I think it serves purposes, monetary purposes, to deny people connection to their ancestral roots.
And remember that the Khoekhoe were the first native people to come into contact with the Dutch, when with the Dutch settlers in the mid-17th century when they came into South Africa. And as the Dutch took over the land, they were dispossessed or enslaved. So with the current land debate that rages on in South Africa, how prominently do you think they feature in those conversations?
They are trying to assert themselves, but their language is not recognized. The last speakers of languages that are 25,000 years old, the oldest existing languages on the planet. So there is a Khoekhoe resurgence. The land debate is a very interesting thing, because I think we need to reform our relationship to land and stop seeing it as property. It's not just property. My feeling about land and about land back is the land needs to be given back to itself, that the land needs to be returned to itself. And we, as part of the land, are part of that process of returning the land to itself. It's not ownership. It's not property. It's not a resource to be exploited. That narrative has to end. It's not serving anybody. In fact, it's destroying all of us.
Rehane, in terms of identity, which forms a very, very important, part of a person's personal fabric, as it were, the Khoekhoe are referred by so many words. They are referred to as the San, the Bushman, the Khoisan. So which is the appropriate word to refer to them?
The usage is contested. Khoisan is used in academic circles because the thing that separated the San and the Khoi from each other, or the Bushmen, they don't even like to be referred to as San. It was a derogatory word used by the Khoi, is their cultural practices. The Khoekhoe were herders. They were nomadic pastoralists because of their interaction with Bantu-speaking people. And the San were nomads, hunter-gatherers. They were the most egalitarian society that this world has ever known, really. So their cultural practices differentiated them, but they are the same haplogroup, which is the DNA. They carry the same DNA. First people DNA, the first people on this planet DNA.
Now, can you describe the lifestyle that the Khoi nation live in modern-day South Africa?
Well, I live in Woodstock, and here I am on television. I'm writing a PhD. I have Khoekhoe DNA. My maternal line is 3 generations pure Khoekhoe DNA. My paternal ancestry is slave from Indonesia, and I live quite a contemporary lifestyle. I have a car. I play bass. How about you?
So, do you want to unpack the series for our viewers and what's in store for them?
It's a journey through through different groups, the Khoekhoe, the Hesekwa, the Nama, and we look at history, the history of the Khoekhoe, the history of the herders, the journeys that they traveled, and the contemporary situation that people find themselves in at present.
And what lessons came with working on this particular project?
Wow, immense lessons about resistance, that people have resisted for so long, that they have fought for so long. And the fact that we are still here, and the immense kind of power in realizing your connection to the land when it has been denied. For colored people, the Group Areas Act was a further dispossession. To realize your connection to the land is a beautiful thing.
Right. Okay, Rehane, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story with us.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, SABC2 unpacks the history of the Khoekhoe Nation in a new 7-part series, the Khoekhoe Saga, which will debut this coming Sunday, the 8th of January at 9 p.m. And we're just in conversation with one of its presenters, Rehane Abrahams. And we're hoping to be joined by its director and writer, Johann Abrahams, who's also a direct descendant, but unfortunately, he was not able to connect with us.